at Beast Games, I would love to hear about the location that Beast Games was filmed at, and then we'll get into some more technical questions. But my goodness, after finally finishing this, I just almost had a heart attack. I feel like it was so intense. My goodness, you guys definitely had me on edge the entire start to finish of this show, and it's like nothing we've ever seen before. But as far as production goes, who decided on the location and setting where this would take place?
The creative was actually done in advance of landing on a location, and the location was really kind of secondary because we built it all, right? So in the end,
Hmm.
all that there was a field where we built the city, and the area was chosen based on its proximity to a bunch of airplane hangars that have been quasi converted to sound stages that were big enough to do some of the sets that we needed. Most specifically, the episode one pillars set. They had a very strong opinion creatively from the top that they wanted the entirety of the set to have no vertical interruptions, basically no columns. And there just aren't a lot of buildings in the world that are 750 by 200 feet wide that have no columns whatsoever. And basically airplane hangars are the only option.
Okay. I mean, the grid setup, I'm not sure what exactly you call that space, but that design was like nothing we'd ever seen before, watching these contestants kind of fall beneath us. How far was that fall? I had to know.
Well, the real fall, not very far. They kind of
Okay.
fell down below into like a padded foam pit um,
Ah.
that sort of captured the contestants in like a very safe way. However, they didn't really know how far they were falling, so I think for them it was still kind of an exciting experience. Even though in real life, of course, it was made just to be a little more practical, and then they would just sort of exit out from the bottom underneath the set.
Yeah, that
It's really kind of an outrageous production because to do that, we had to build a scaffold that was 11 feet tall that covered the entirety of the 750 foot by 200 foot stage. Everything was built up 11 feet, and then there were basically 1,000 little padded boxes for the 1,000 people to fall into, and then dozens and dozens of safety people who would kind of go and fish them out of there every time somebody fell.
underneath. Wow, 1,000 individual boxes. So how long did that take to build that entire setup?
5 weeks, 5 weeks of
5 weeks.
construction, which is
Yeah.
about
Wow.
half what it should have taken. But
We built
Uh,
everything very quickly for this production.
I'm actually shocked that you were able to do that in 5 weeks. I mean, it looks so incredible on screen. It actually reminds me of, when you fall asleep and you're on an airplane and you jump because you feel like you're falling. That's kind of what I would imagine that moment for each of those contestants to have felt when they were basically being dropped down below. But I love that they actually had no clue how far they were falling. So you really saw that in the expressions of each of them in those moments. As far as all of the different setups, I mean, there's so many in this show. What was the most difficult one for you to design?
Definitely the trapdoors had a lot of technical elements involved. It took a team a really long time to figure out how it was going to function. So that was most of the work. I think as far as having a lot of different elements to figure out and kind of figuring out the design, the city was the most complex, just from the start of getting Beast to work with us on like their vision, what they wanted it to be like, also all the practical elements that are necessary for people to live in a set because they did actually live there. So having bedrooms and a cafeteria and all, entertainment for them and bathrooms and all of that took a lot to figure out and kind of how to make all those things work in this world that they were having wanting to achieve. Um, and then the giant tower, landscaping with real trees. Um, Also the fact that it's reality, so you're shooting 360, like every area, everything's on camera. You can't really control where they go. So that one had a lot of moving parts, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it was
yeah,
such a cool village. Oh, go ahead, Stephen.
No, I was just going to add to that both of those sets, the episode one set and then the city in episode two, presented challenges that are not normal production design challenges, and that really almost nobody has ever had a chance to problem solve for before. With episode one, it's that when you're doing 1,000 of something mechanical, you're really entering the realm of manufacturing rather than set design, which is all about totally bespoke one-off things, but having sort of figuring out how to scale up to times 1,000 is very challenging. And then everything that Isabella said about episode two, the city, the making a set that people actually lived on, and not just a few people, but 500 people.
That's incredible. I mean, I think of it kind of reminded me of being at a camp of some kind, but yeah, like all the reality shows I've seen, Big Brother and all these ones where they're in these homes, it's such a small number. So I don't know how the two of you didn't get overwhelmed with having to provide for 500 contestants. I mean, it's got to be so challenging. And of course, to make everybody comfortable and make sure that they have all the necessities needed during the time period that they're actually going to be on the show for. And then, there was this monster truck scene as well. I'd love to hear from you with that whole thing of them having to actually pull the two trucks and going over those massive speed bumps. My goodness, that speed bump challenge, as soon as they had to get the truck over that, what was it like building that whole stage and setup?
Well, this is a really massive show, as we've said a couple times, so that the monster trucks specifically we can't really speak to because there was another production design team on that episode.
Okay.
There was a point. Isabella and I designed most of the season, but there was actually a third production designer named Dave Edwards, and he took three of the episodes on basically because it was just too much for any one group to handle. And almost across the board, all departments had that kind of shadowing.
Which would make sense. I mean, there's a lot going on, especially the first installation where you were saying I didn't realize that you literally had to build individual boxes per individual talent. That's crazy. And aesthetically, just the structures, I'm sure that you had to put some thought process into what they look like and how they would come off on screen. Were there certain challenges that you had to deal with as far as what they look like visually in person versus how they would look on people's screens?
Well, designing for camera is our primary realm of expertise. So it's all about the integrated lighting, the surface finishes, all of those little details. We work in conjunction with the other departments with lighting and camera, doing tests, making sure that we know how things are going to expose, what the color shift might be, and planning for all of that. But that is quite typical to all shows that we do.
What was the most expensive part of design, would you say, in this specific show?
There were so many expensive parts because I think one of the challenges too in picking, because of the scale, something that normally you might have a lot of different options for how to finish something. A lot of things were off the table just because of the amount of time that we had and the amount of it that was needed. So not as simple as picking like a finish or a fixture or something that you like and then purchasing it because we had such limited lead time and needed such huge amounts. So even with things like built-in LED, we struggled with getting the amounts we needed. So a lot of things did have to be adjusted for kind of finding the right material that looked good, but also fit the needs. Um, I think one of the most expensive elements was the tower, which again had to kind of be designed in mind with how do we make such a giant structure that's going to support so many people in such a short amount of time? And then how do we then finish it so it can be on camera and ready? So we ended up going with like a truss built that then got completely skinned. So that was an incredibly expensive element. But I think all the sets had very expensive elements just because of the size of them. Like when you look at the cube set, it was 100 cubes that each had to be fabricated. So any element, when you multiply it that many times, like adds a lot of cost. But something like the tower had a lot of engineering and design and like safety that adds a lot of cost as well.
Well, at least the tower wasn't used just in one episode either, which is nice. So you can technically, I guess, divide that per episode it was used.
Yeah,
And
with or without amortization, the episode one set is the most expensive set that's probably ever been put on television, and then the city and tower set comes in second.
wow. Wow, that's pretty crazy. And as far as your favorite part for each of you to work on, what would that be?
I think also the tower was very interesting. It's something that I think we'd never done before. We've done a lot of stunt shows, shows where you have structures that are suspended by cranes or but not quite to that scale of like a multi-floor um structure like that. And also in the city, it was just fun to kind of have this little town built with like, landscaping and trees. And so that one was fun, just more from a getting to see this like world that Beast had imagined and bringing it to life. But I think the tower was a big technical challenge, which was fun.
I think for me, the most exciting part was just, throughout our industry, the last couple years have been kind of a time of contraction when everybody who hires you, everybody who brings you in is sort of thinking a little bit small. And suddenly we met the team from Beast and they were thinking so big and just saying, we want to swing for the fences. What's the most outrageous set that you can think of for 1,000 people to drop through trapdoors? We aren't joking. We know there are logistical problems. We know the budget's going to be astronomical. We do want to build a city for 500 people that's a real city. And at the time, and we want to blow it up at the end. And now we didn't quite get to the blowing up, but when you swing for the fences, you miss once in a while. I just thought that was a privilege to be a part of.
Well, the two of you crushed it on this one. I mean, it's so mind-blowing. I can't even imagine what the next project will be to outdo this one. I'm really excited to see the future for the two of you and hope to see Beast Games again. Maybe a larger tower or even more of those boxes. I can imagine maybe 1 million boxes. I don't even know how long that would take. But congratulations again to the two of you on Beast Games. It was so fun to watch. And of course, I wish I could now walk up a tower. I feel like, I don't know if you already took it down, but that would be so fun to actually go and tour it now, tour the little town and tour the tower. Could
I
be an
have to
amusement
think
park.
the Beast amusement park is not too far in the future.
I could see that. I hope the two of you are on board to help design and be a part of that strategy. But thank you so much again for taking the time to chat with me. Be sure to check out Beast Games if you have not already. Thanks again, Stephen and Isabella.